Everybody, can you hear my voice?
Yes, a little loud, Sam.
Ah, tough shit, you got no choice. So grab a glass and sit back in your chair, 'cause Uncorked is going live to air.
Welcome to the show. This is Uncorked, welcoming you to the world of whiskey and get a closer look at the people that keep it spinning. I'm Boutique Dave, and I've got my sidekick here, Dr. Whiskey. Say hello, Dr. Whiskey.
Hello, Dr. Whiskey.
That's exactly what I was expecting. We are the official podcast of the Boutique Whisky Company, a global independent bottler. Head to our website or our socials at Boutique Whisky is easy way to follow us. If you want to listen to any of my nonsense, I live on Twitter at Boutique Dave. Welcome. This is episode 20, Sam. Episode 20. Can you believe that?
I can't. It's been a slow start in 2021 for us because we only recorded our first episode recently. But I think we're back, baby. We got lots of ideas.
We're back.
And it's an exciting year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about about a year ago that Felix, no more than a year ago, I suppose, because of lockdown. But our colleague Felix came back from Australia with a bag full of whiskey samples. So today's episode is sort of inspired by that trip. He came back, and the day before I had tasted some samples from like Mortlach. That we had a 15-year-old Strathisla, a 20-year-old Mortlach, unnameable Glenlivet 24-year-old from Scotland, and great samples. He came back the next day, brought in the samples from Australia and Tasmanian distilleries, and we tasted through them. And I have to say there were 2-year-old whiskeys, 3-year-old whiskeys, and some of them blew these old Mortlach Strathislas out of the water, and I was shocked. My eyes, maybe it sounds naive, but I'm not embarrassed to say, I really had no idea that the caliber of spirits being produced. I'd been to Australia when I worked for Balvenie, tasted whiskeys, met real nerds who try to say, "Oh, you got to try this. You got to try this." Here, Bakery Hill, showing me Australian whiskey. But man, even since those trips, it's come along a long way. So we wanted to have an episode talking all about that. And Dave, we were speaking about how much do you know about Australian whiskey, and neither of us knew much. So we started Googling, found a podcast from James Atkinson called Drinks Adventures, and it wasn't just about whiskey, it was about the whole world of whiskey, and really needed to speak more to James and thought he could have some insight, not just into Australian whiskey, but to the world, the climate that we're facing now. The most exciting time, as Alice LaSalle said in a recent article about Rye, the most exciting time in whiskey's history. That's right now. So welcome, James Atkinson, Drinks Adventures.
Welcome.
So good to be here with you guys.
Well, you're usually the one welcoming guests. How does that feel being on the other side of that?
Oh, I've got to tell you, it feels pretty weird. I've done a couple of these ones where I'm on the other end of the interview, and I'm generally much more comfortable being the guy who asks questions. But yeah, the more you do, the easier it gets, right? So,
Good, well,
Boy, have we got some awkward questions for you this morning.
Yeah, no one in the industry is going to talk to me after this interview. So yeah,
we'll try to find all the most contentious areas to make sure you tread upon. So suddenly your guest list diminishes. No, I mean, look, you can see starting. I recommend anyone listening to this podcast, turn this podcast off, go to Drinks Adventures, start at Series 1. You will find an area of drink that you're passionate about. You will find makers or musicians or artists or writers that inspire you. There's so many diverse guests. How did the whole thing start, James?
Well, I guess my background was in journalism, and I've been a journalist for probably about 20 years now. But about 10 years ago, I got a job editing a publication called The Shout, which is probably a bit like off-license news or one of these kind of trade publications that's read by right. retailers, and that was kind of, I guess I'd always kind of enjoyed a drink, and I'd kind of travelled outside Australia and realised that there were much better tasting beers than the ones that I'd grown up drinking here. And, you know, I had a little bit of a taste for whiskey and I enjoyed wine. But then when I started that job, you know, I just got invited to amazing tastings and amazing events. And straight away I was kind of like, wow, this industry is really cool. You know, the people that are in it are super passionate. Like that's probably you know, having had a background in writing about, I've done a lot of business journalism and stuff like that. And when I got into the drinks space, I really kind of found that, you know, most of the people that work in the space really love what they do, and they, you know, they enjoy a drink too, and it's a very social kind of industry. And so, you know, the longer I guess that I was in, you know, editing that publication and going to more events and tasting more great drinks, the more I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm going to be doing this for a while. And I guess since then I've done, you know, I've edited another publication, a beer publication. I've done a lot of freelance writing for a bunch of magazines and pretty much anyone who'll hire me these days. And then about probably 2.5 years ago now, I was kind of looking at the whole podcast space and thinking, you know, I genuinely have a passion for that really spreads across all drinks. I do, you know, because of the fortunate position that I was in, where I was able to taste a lot of different drinks, you kind of realize that the best of everything, you know, is of extremely high quality. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of found that, you know, I became really enthusiastic about Japanese sake. I discovered that I really like, even though I thought I didn't like cider, I really like the best quality ciders, you know, the ones that, you know, use cider apples and have tannins and have complexity and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I kind of kept finding that I was, any preconception that I had in my mind, you know, tequila's really bad, it gives you hangovers, and then it was like, well, I was just drinking cheap tequila. And so I was kind of finding that I was becoming more open-minded to drinks rather than the other way around. And I just kind of got to thinking that, you know, maybe there was a place for a podcast that brought that open-mindedness to the whole world of drinks. And, you know, also looking at what's happening in the craft beverages space in Australia at the moment. You know, there's obviously a lot of craft breweries that have popped up over the last decade, and there's increasingly a lot of craft distilleries that have popped up, you know, small cider producers, kind of innovative wine producers, and there's a hell of a lot of collaboration happening between a lot of these, you know, cross-category stuff where people are making hybrid products or giving their barrels to someone, and, you know, then the barrel comes back and a barrel that had whiskey in it gets a beer made in it, and then it goes to a rum producer or whatever it is. And the more of that I was kind of seeing, I was kind of thinking that whilst I think in some ways it might have made it easier for myself if I had just focused on one thing like beer or whiskey or wine or whatever, I really saw that there was a market for someone like myself who was going to be a bit of an all-rounder. And that's kind of how the podcast started. And it's just, you know, I think when you start a podcast, you don't quite know how it's all going to unfold. And so it's just a bit of an evolving beast, really. But out of all the stuff that I do, it's kind of like the thing that I enjoy doing the most. So it's really good fun.
But it's such a breadth of guests. So, like, I know you can see that Dave and I, we only invite people that look like us, white men with glasses and beards. Our episodes. I'm obviously joking, but you seem to get guests from all over the world of wine and beer and writing and thinking about drink and even philosophical approaches to what it means to be pulling from the earth in this way and those types of conversations. What's the thing that you're trying to chase with the journalist mind? Because obviously, you know, you fell in love with drink. The community and the kindness is, as you were saying, is part of it. But what gets you inspired for that next episode? What are you trying to chase? What story are you trying to tell?
I guess it's like, I suppose it's just, you know, stories and people that interest me personally, because if I'm not interested in it, then, you know, like, I'm not going to be able to make an interesting episode about it. But I suppose I'm always trying to think of, I'm very conscious of the fact that with a podcast like mine, there's going to be a certain demographic of people that are going to look down the episodes, and if it's not a whiskey episode, they're not going to listen to it. Or if it's not a beer episode, they're not going to listen to it. And that's the reality of like what a lot of the way that a lot of people drink, and it's the reality of the way that a lot of people listen to podcasts. So I suppose I'm always trying to find a hook that might potentially bring in someone who wouldn't normally be interested in that beverage. And yeah, I think it probably has worked sometimes not, but that's kind of the aim of the game.
Yeah, well, I mean,
guess.
look, I don't know the numbers, but I hear what you're saying, because what struck me immediately when I discovered you about a year ago was the title, the names you give to episodes. So we are very unimaginative. Ours we typically call episode 20, where stuff happens. And no one's going to click on that unless they see a name, because you're right. What engages, and I'm guilty of it. So go ahead, Dave.
Most people are surprised that we can count that far.
Yeah, exactly. We made it to 20. Let's celebrate. How the king of beers changed the world, or how this country did this, and those type of titles, which strike me as obviously someone who has a journalism background, they're intriguing to even people who don't care about Pilsner or don't care about Orlando, or those type of topics. So, is that in your mind?
I can sit there for like half an hour laboring over a subject of a podcast sometimes. I know that sounds a bit sad, and sometimes I go back and like change them if I feel like the episode's not doing that well. Because I've read a lot and I've listened to too many podcasts about podcasting, and kind of, I think about this stuff probably more than I should. And it's so important. Like that's what, if you think of, on someone's phone, that little area where they just see those first few words of the subject, and then maybe the first few words of like the main body copy. That's what entices people to listen in, and that's kind of, there's actually research around that sort of speaks to how important that stuff is in getting people to listen. So
I'm writing this down, Sam.
It's very much a work in progress, I'll say that.
Well, look, all 17 of our listeners, they're fine with our titling system.
No, you guys are in the UK, population of 60 million or whatever it is. You just have to turn up and you end up with a few million listeners, don't you?
haven't noticed that yet, but let's hope for it. All right.
Yeah.
Look, so then on that side, bringing people in to find your podcast and engage with it through titles, but also what you just briefly answered what drives you. What in the wide world of drinks and spirits and generally is exciting you right now?
Well, I'm a big whiskey fan and a big whiskey drinker. And, to be honest, that's out of all of and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you guys, but out of all of the spirits, that's definitely my spirit of choice. And, I mean, I'm not saying anything new here, but I guess the world of whiskey right now, it's so exciting. There's so much going on. There's great whiskey being made everywhere. And in Australia, it's a big country. I don't get around to every state. I don't manage to visit every distillery. And, a lot of the small distilleries, their whiskies are pretty expensive. They're not sending out, samples of whiskey to media necessarily. And so all this is to say that I'm always learning about new distilleries, even in Australia, like even today, just new names, not in the ones that you've got in your Australian collection, but new names today that when I was just doing a bit of reading that popped up, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard of them. So I think whiskey is definitely exciting me, and I suppose, the whole timeline with whiskey is quite interesting, isn't it? Like there's sort of, you kind of learn about new distilleries and you kind of get excited. And then there's this kind of waiting game where you're kind of wondering when you're actually ever going to see any whiskey from them. And then I think in Australia right now, it's like each year there'll be 2 or 3 distilleries, or maybe more than that, but whose whiskey is coming online, and it's really kind of exciting when a distillery releases their first single malt, for sure. So
So,
Yeah.
yeah, the growth in Australian whiskey has been phenomenal, isn't it, over the last couple of years? I was just reading recently, like 293 distilleries in operation now in Australia, and that's probably changed since that article was written. And over 50 of them have whiskey products in the market right now, with many more in the process of creating their first whiskey. So it is pretty phenomenal growth since, the whiskey industry in Australia was sort of killed off in the 80s. Um,
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I know you guys, you did an Overeem bottling a few years ago now, I seem to recall. And I had Jane Overeem on the podcast last year. And, she was telling me about how when her father started Overeem whiskey in Tasmania, there were 4 distilleries. They were the 4th distillery in Tasmania, and you guys know how small Tasmania is. It's a small island. There's more than 50 distilleries there now. I mean, that's insane. And I'd say they're probably all making whiskey. That's actually not true. There'd be a couple making vodka, and maybe there's a couple making gin, but the vast majority of them are whiskey distilleries. So yeah, it's really crazy. I mean, the thing to say is that the vast majority of these distilleries are very small. But one thing that is happening at the moment is that there are some bigger players that are kind of coming into the market, and there's some bigger players that I know about that haven't really gone public yet, and I think that's really going to be interesting for the market when some of these companies that are well resourced, got plenty of capital, got the time to wait for whiskey to mature. Once they start bringing whiskey to market at much more moderate price points, it's probably going to shake the market up a little bit, because the average cost of whiskey here is very expensive, as you would know.
Well, it's probably been prohibitive for their growth for a while, but I think you're absolutely right. We're on the cusp of it truly becoming global, and that's part of why I guess Boutique feels so lucky to have secured some cash. So how did that happen, Dave?
Well, yeah, we've been pretty excited about hearing about Australian whiskey over here, but you can never get any. There's very little of it coming over. There's a little bit of Limeburn has come over, a little bit of Overeem, and yes, we bottled 2 batches of Overeem a long, long time ago. And in 2014, 15, was it the Australian distilleries started winning World Whisky Awards, the best whiskies in the world. It was a single cask, so no one could get hold of this stuff. Sullivan's Cove, I think, is the one that really put Australia on the map for the people in the UK. And then the great whiskey commentaries, writers and commentators over here, Dominic Roscoe, really leading the charge for Australian whiskey, but you just couldn't get hold of any. So we did a sneaky thing. And we sent our cask buyer over to Australia and wouldn't let him back until he came back with some whiskies, basically. No, I mean
he probably almost got stuck here based on when you told me that he returned home. It was a year ago now.
he did get home before then. No, but I mean, what was really cool was when he was meeting these distillers, that they knew who we were and were really up for it. They loved what we were up to. So a lot of them would, sure, we'd love to work with you. I mean, some of them, you say they're just family businesses, husband and wife, out to, the distillers in their shed next to the house. I mean, there's nothing fancy about it. They're just passionate about making great spirits. And I think Blackgate, we bottled 8 brand new labels, 8 Australian distilleries, 7 of them single malts, and 1 of them rye from Belgrove. And some of these are so small operations. I think it's like 4% we took like 4% of their annual output through the cask that we took. I mean, it was just mind blowing that they'd even let us have that much. But yeah, they were really, really up for letting Boutique do their thing. And then Emily, our artist, has created some, just cracking labels, just beautiful labels. I'm really looking forward to putting these out to the world, to everybody to see them very, very shortly.
But what you just said, David, it is a crazy time because although the whiskey world is bigger than it ever has been, there's more flavors, more people producing it. There truly is finally a real global whiskey language, with local dialects and even, unique words. It's richer than it's ever been, but it's still a tiny world. Boutique's known in Australia to the guys at Tin Shed or some of the distilleries we worked with. That's crazy. We're still a small community now spread really all over the world. It's a beautiful thing about whiskey. And I guess it's something that you saw, James, when you got into drinks and started writing for the trade magazine. You'd go to events, see the same faces, and feel that sense of how small this booze world actually is.
Well, do you know what? I'm going to actually illustrate how small it is, Sam, because you mentioned before that you were ex-Balvenie. Is that what you said? Because you seem familiar, and I remember that you would have done a tasting for the 50-year-old with David Stewart that I think I remotely attended from Sydney.
Dalesford.
Well, I was in Sydney, and you were with it's David Stewart.
David Stewart, yeah, I was there, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a tasting of the 50-year-old Balvenie, and you led that tasting. You and David led that tasting.
This is embarrassing. So wait,
does that ring a bell? It was you.
It would have been me. Yes, I've got photos to prove it. I'm going to go through my photos and find one of you. We should have had this conversation before pressing record, because how embarrassing.
So no, it's just yes. In answer to your question, yes, it's a very small world, Sam.
I love the passion. I mean, I'm from outside the industry as well. My background is engineering, and I'm from outside of the industry completely. But yeah, falling in love with the industry and the passion that people have for their whiskies is, the whiskey makers is what really drew me in. Not just, it's the whole atmosphere of the family of whiskey makers. There doesn't seem to be any animosity between different, rivals. It's all about making great product wherever it is, and people want to help each other across the industry, which is what I love.
Well, I want to talk about that. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned about putting world whiskies into a lineup, and they stand up against some old scotches. I do a lot of my tastings blind, and I love sticking a little young world whiskey into a lineup of old scotch and people just not knowing, and then I tell them it was a 3-year-old Bavarian whiskey. What? And it stood up alongside that Mortlach and that Strathmill or something like that. Just you slip it into a lineup, and all of a sudden it blows people's minds that people can make whiskey outside of Scotland and it's bloody good, and it doesn't need to be 100 years old or whatever. It's just opening those eyes up to people and saying, the rest of the world makes whiskey. And that's what boutique whiskey has been trying to do right from the start. Is, it wasn't limiting ourselves to single malts. We wanted to be world whiskey bottlers. And we can't be world whiskey makers because that'd be very expensive putting a distillery in every country. But we can go around and talk to distillers. Right.
But Dave, your answer to what's your favorite whiskey embodies that. And I don't know if this is, maybe you could have some insight into this, James, whether it's the same in every industry, whether a beer drinker and a wine drinker answer the same way. But you ask Dave, what's your favorite whiskey, and he tends to say,
it's usually the next one.
So that spirit of exploration is intrinsic to the whiskey journey, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always like trying new things. I get bored very, very quickly if I've got the same thing, in my glass every night. That would be very
Speaking of boring, let's play a silly game.
Uh-oh.
As you know,
this one
James,
either.
That's good because you got to play. We do ask the tough questions. We show off our technical prowess, and then we play a silly game.
Yeah, wow.
That's how we roll. And Uncorked
have I got
Whisky sessions.
I've got to change my hats for this one then.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
He's got the swag hat.
I've got my Ramblin' Rascal T-shirt on, and I've got my Denver Lily glass, which
good bar.
I have to say, Denver, what it lacks in maintaining coffee warmth, it makes up for in delivering bouquet. Let's keep it off. So James, to buzz in for this game, we tend to use a bottle. So if you have a bottle to hand, I don't know if you got one nearby.
I've got a can. I've got a glass or a can.
Can you ping your glass?
I have.
Yeah, the glass. I think that'd be fine.
Yeah, I could probably do that. Hang on.
Man, that's not. Yeah, we
Hear that?
will not miss that. And Dave,
Okay,
what's your buzz in, just so I can hear it?
I was going to rattle the corks. No, I'm going to take this off because I can't see the screen from all these bloody.
Okay, Dave's
let's find
uncorking.
it. There we go. That's a nice little
That's
plop.
lovely. Yeah. That was a D. And we've got James with his ding. All right, well, let's play the game. The game is pretty simple. It's called Whiskey Mixers Down Under. I won't do that again. I won't do that again, I promise. We got to work out the Aussie distillery names from the mixed up picture. So we're going to see images that will try to hint to us what distillery we are speaking of. Okay? So the first one we'll play friendly, just so we get the idea. Yep, I was going to give that as the example. That's funny that that's the first one.
Oh, that's a nice easy one, yeah.
Yep, I can see some Spam.
Tins.
They're
And
tins.
It looks like
Cans.
kind of like an outhouse.
I don't think
shed.
Spam
Tin shed,
Spam
tin
Outhouse
shed.
isn't one of the distilleries of Australia.
Yeah.
Tin Shed is my guess. Yes, there it is. That's Tin Shed. Okay,
is.
so that's the premise. We good? We're very competitive now, James.
Yep,
Now
cool.
we need to read these. Give me a second to describe these things out loud because we are primarily a podcast. Even though over the past 11 months we've moved more to video, we do obviously get most listeners that way. So give me a chance to explain the image so people can play at home too. Cool. Here we go. Oh, it's a series of mounds, maybe mountains. I'm not sure, and it's got baked goods on the top. Maybe it's
Bakery Hill.
I was trying to avoid saying hill. Fuck, that was difficult.
So was I allowed to jump in then,
Yeah.
or am I kind of spoiling it for
You
the-
neither
for the people at
uncorked
home?
or ding ding ding. So
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, all right, okay.
Is it Bakery Hill,
right.
Dr. Whiskey?
well done, Dave. Baker Hill, 1 to Dave.
Cool.
You're right. That was hard. I couldn't
one,
think of
man.
another. Yeah. What'd you say? What do you have in there, Dave?
It's a young Ardmore. It's delicious. I've corked
That's
it.
right. Bakery Hill it is. Okay.
Bakery Hill.
All right, there's
One of
Dr.
the,
Whiskey. He's amongst 3 beds with some stars in the sky. Oh, that's James.
Starwood.
Star Ward.
Very
Yes,
good.
it looks like a hospital ward. That very well done.
Dr. Whiskey Ward Star. Lovely.
Were you going to say something about Bakery Hill, Dave?
I was just going to say Bakery Hill. It was one of the boutique whiskies that we've just bottled, a 5-year-old. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one.
I'm going to guess most of these are.
So am I.
Oh, they are indeed. Yes. Okay.
All right, there is some sort of opening or door or maybe a gate. It's not white; it's a different color. It looks like it might be painted this color, but it's a dark color. It's a very dark color, and it's a gate.
Oh,
Dave.
it's definitely black. It's definitely Blackgate. The
It is
distillery
black.
distillery founded by Brian Hollingsworth in New South Wales. He's one of Bill Lark's students as well. Excellent.
Ding, ding, ding. He's correct. So what do we got? 2 each. Well done, everyone. Now we're seeing an image of a sort of whipped cream spray can thing, a whipping spatula. No, what do you call that? Oh, God. Beater, an egg beater, a broken bone.
It's a whisk.
A whisk, thank you. A whisk, a broken bone of an arm, it looks like, and a red fish. Quite an image, and I might have nightmares about that bone marrow being exposed there. Jesus.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Bone marrow. Bone. Whipped.
Yeah, there's a whipped thing about it.
Red fish.
Red fish, there's the red blood, it's an arm or a hand. Tibia, fibia, I have no idea. This one's tough. I'm struggling. Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what it is. Whippersnapper.
Whipper. And a red snapper, of course. And the fingers are doing the snap. Oh, very good.
Oh, I didn't get that at all. right, Dave.
Snapped bone, red snapper. Oh, very clever, John. Very clever. Too clever for us, obviously.
Yeah, that's right. Shout out to John Minter, the poor bastard who has to edit these episodes, but also the creative genius that makes them look pretty and creates our games. Thanks, John. That was a great one. Next one is a couple swans, 3 of them actually, 2 on the left, 1 on the right. One of them is wearing a hat and sunglasses, and it's saying sex, bugs, and bits of bread rolls. Sex, bugs, and bits of bread rolls. So someone's using reused bread in their whiskey making? Is that the illusion here? I should have looked at these so I could pretend to be smart.
Swan, not a Jim Swan reference, no.
Well, are there Swan references in Australia? Are there Jim Swan? And then the rock and roll, sort of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, sex, bugs, and bits of bread.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Shit. Oh, I'm embarrassed. No, I don't have that one either.
Yeah, I've got nothing there.
Don't worry, James. I've actually never heard of that distillery,
Wild
so...
Swan. No, neither have I.
It's not one we bottled.
No, I'm going to assume, though, it's Wild Swan is a distillery that right now is making gin. And soon we'll see some whiskey.
Yes.
I hope that's not a dig, and I hope Wild Swan doesn't hate me for that. Okay, let's go. All right, the next image is a very wild turning road with a devil maybe hitchhiking.
2 devils, one with a
Two
trident.
devils,
Oh,
you're
both
right.
got a trident. Yeah, and a winding road. Winding road.
Yeah, winding.
Is that a
I'm
winding
gonna have
road?
to start Googling in my other screen, so again I can pretend to be clever. Google every Australian distillery.
It doesn't seem like
That
it
sucks.
could be from one of our 8.
Listen, if you're getting this at home quicker than we are, you
Overrated.
need to follow us or tag us into anything at Boutique and tell us you got the answer, and we will send you a prize. That is embarrassing that we can't do it.
Hey.
Come on, hold on.
There was 293 distilleries, and I can't remember them all.
No, but I don't.
What's another word for devil?
Winding roads, devils.
Oh, devil. Yeah, okay.
Devils.
Yeah, it's
Devils.
Was that a Tasmanian reference as well? I don't know. Oy. All right, let's move along then for the entertainment.
Let's move on.
Everyone's
Well
so
over
fun.
30 seconds.
Oh, Jesus.
Hellier's Road, of course.
Oh, well done. Yeah, that's got to be it. Hellier's Road.
We could have had that. We should have had that again.
Aye.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well
Message us
Good
at
job.
us. Get in touch with Boutique and say I'm smarter than you are, and we will congratulate you for that. All right. The next one begins with an image of a tree, and it says in the top left-hand corner, number 1, the ... Number 1, the ... Ooh. Dave.
Well, that number 1, the Larch, is a well-known Monty Python sketch. But the Lark, it's got to be the Lark Distillery.
Very well done. That's my guess as well. Let's see. Lark. Well, good. Very well rationalized. And if you don't know Monty Python, come on. Actually, if someone doesn't know Monty Python, then they're probably not listening to a podcast like this. I was going to ask you about the records behind you too, James, because there's something about people who are into whiskey having similar passions. It's so interesting. Anyway, we'll come to that. We'll come to that later. But yep, Whiskey Geek probably is familiar with Monty Python. All right, that was Lark. We're on the next one now. We see a bottle of hooch with XXX across the front, plus red cherries.
Cherries, aren't they?
I would say red cherries, yeah. So that looks like booze plus cherries.
Poison. Triple X. No, that wouldn't be poison, would it?
Well, I don't know, what is it? Yeah, the X is just booze, isn't it? I don't even fucking know. I haven't seen a cartoon in a while. Oy. Nope, I do not know it. No stabs in the dark, anyone?
No.
We'll live. Let's pass it along. Again, if you got it right at home, screw you. Hoochery. Oh, cherry.
Cherry. Oh,
Right.
very clever. Very right.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm going to put this back on and see if it gives me any inspiration.
Yeah, we're struggling. We should have done some more research.
Hoochery. Hoot cherry. Nice. Very good. Very good,
But
John.
of course we're not going to know it. You know, remember when you got into whiskey, Dave or James, and you know, in Scotland there's over 100 distilleries. We're like, wow, isn't that incredible? Scotch is so cool. Now, anywhere you look around the world, like you just listed, 290 distilleries in Australia, almost 1,000, I think, making malt or rye in America. I mean, it's crazy.
Wow.
It's an exciting time for whiskey. Right. Next, oops, if I can get to the next slide. No, that might be the end. This has been another edition of whatever that game was called.
Whiskey mixers.
was-
Oh, well, I didn't
Whiskey
need that in the end. They were good. Very good,
No, it
John.
was- Yeah, very good.
Too hard for us.
And it was,
Yeah, I got the easy ones at the beginning, and then I was completely useless.
John was very generous giving us the easy ones at the beginning, so we got a bit overconfident, I think. And it wasn't just an ad for our whiskeys, which I appreciated too, John. Thank you for the ones we have coming out. So I think they're landing the end of this month in Australia. It takes a while to get there by boat, I'll tell you.
It does take it.
Especially at the moment, I'd say, too.
That's probably true. Yeah, well,
Everything's taking
yeah,
longer.
yeah. And I guess we've seen
Was it
online,
5 weeks on the ocean? I think Phoebe was saying the other day. 5 weeks on the ocean. I think it's 5 weeks to sail from London to Sydney. Is it?
Yeah, it's 5 weeks on the ocean, or you can fly there and it takes just a day, and then 4 weeks and 6 days to get through customs. It's pretty intense. You ever landed in Australia, Dave?
I haven't. No, I've never been to Australia.
It's a serious affair. They lie. It's really respectable. It's just fascinating how protected they are of what you bring into the country, and they are not messing around. I'm not just talking. I mean, I only discovered that program afterwards, but when I landed there, I was shocked. We were put into this line, and you kept getting filtered. Especially, you know, I thought it was amazing, and eye opening. Oh, island living. Cool. What should we talk about now, guys? The thing I'll take it then. So one thing I wanted to ask you about in my notes here is dealing with guests, which I think the episodes I've listened to anyway, and I certainly haven't listened to all 8 seasons, but again, I recommend everyone to find Drinks Adventures, give it a listen. You'll learn something new about Pilsner or about winemaking or about New World, you know, how grapes work, how, you know, whiskey, all the distilleries you've never heard of. It's fascinating, but you know, the way you are with guests, I think is pretty consistent, even if your guests are incredibly variable. Now, again, I haven't heard every episode, but I thought it was really interesting that sometimes you're pulling information from the guest, and sometimes you're just setting them off, and off they go, and they can talk for almost the whole episode. So you know, some guests are hard work, and some make your job really easy. Do you have any examples, if you're comfortable talking about it, of really sort of uncomfortable moments?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably those... It's funny, people in interviews, even people who are very experienced at doing interviews, still get very nervous sometimes. So I think those are probably the most awkward ones, is when you can just tell that the other person's not comfortable. And you know, I'm always trying to work hard to make them feel comfortable. And sometimes, you know, there's not really anything that you can do to make someone relax. No, really, awfully awkward situations.
Well, that's fortunate then. But was there a change then in that awkwardness? Because I know you've been doing the podcast since 2018. Yeah, so almost 3 years.
Yeah,
there must have been a transition, you know, last March.
I know that I've definitely gotten to be a better interviewer in that time, and but you know, that's probably something that's crossed over into my writing, you know, like the interviews that I do that aren't for the podcast, because you do kind of, when you're listening back to yourself, you know, doing an interview for the podcast all the time, you become very well aware of all of your tics and all of your, you know, I'm probably doing it now. I'm going to listen back to this now. And but yeah, when you listen back to yourself, you become much more aware of how to finish a question. You know, don't over ask a question. Trying to make it easier for yourself not to have to edit things down afterwards, I suppose. Yeah.
Over asking, that's my middle name. But then were you in person? I mean, so what had to change about your format when we did go into lockdown?
Well, I think the main thing was when I started it, I kind of was doing most interviews face to face, and because back then I was actually doing this thing called traveling, which was, you know, I got to leave Australia on occasions. I got to leave Sydney on occasions. It was awesome. And I kind of was getting to travel around enough that I was able to get interesting guests just by doing it face to face. And, you know, one thing which you guys would be aware of doing this show is that, you know, organizing all the tech that goes into recording an episode like this, it can be a bit painful, and that it's kind of doing the remote interviews is kind of something that the actual tech behind them is something that I don't probably enjoy so much. But in saying that, you know, last year when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do face-to-face interviews anymore because we did have a period here of being in you know, a proper lockdown for a few months. Then I also got to thinking, well, now is kind of probably the perfect time to get like bucket list people for interviews because everyone's at home. So, you know, I managed to get Sam Neill last year, and you know, when he was basically quarantining in Sydney, you know, before he set off to the UK to shoot Jurassic Park, the latest Jurassic Park film. And there's no way, I don't think, that if I had have got Sam Neill for an interview, it probably would have been a much more long, drawn out, painful affair to lock that interview in, rather than right now. Pretty much anyone that you could hope to interview is sitting at home pretty bored. So it's a good time to go for those big fish.
Absolutely. You know what I mean? Well, it's obviously worked. I mean, a recent episode with Tool frontman and Pucifer musician Maynard James Keenan and many other guests, like, you know, celebrities in the wine and whiskey world, but even outside. That's really exciting. Dave, we discovered that, didn't we? Like, we had in May when we tried to invite people for that World Whiskey Summit. I've never heard so many yeses.
Yeah, everyone said yes, and we thought, oh, we thought we'll invite this many people, and hopefully, if half of them come along, we're winning. And everyone turned
That's what it
around
used
and
to
said
be.
Yes, and we did the same with the Christmas episode, and we're expecting like a couple of guests, and we ended up having to break it into 3 sessions because we couldn't fit everyone in a Zoom. In a StreamYard channel, there's only so many people we could get in. I think we run it in StreamYard, wasn't it? And so we had to do hour slots and send one lot of guests out, and then the doorbell rings and bring another lot in. It was just mayhem for 3 hours, but a lot of fun. Yeah, because you're right, everyone sat at home, and yeah, I say yes to everything. And so anyone calls me up, hey, can you come and talk to us? Yeah, sure. It's at midnight. Okay. Yeah, it's early I like the early morning tastings in Australia best. You always seem to start your whiskey tasting around 9:30 in the morning. I did a very early one the other day actually with the Oak Barrel. I've done quite a few. I've been to Sydney I think about 4 or 5 times since lockdown started over here. But sitting from this room with the Oak Barrel in Sydney, Scotty Fitzsimons, and for the record, we did a whiskey tasting the other morning. It started at 8 o'clock, and he just stopped the session as we were talking and said, "If anyone had 8:15 on their bingo card, that Dave takes his first sip of whiskey." I just wanted to point out, I spat afterwards. It was 8:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
I know you too well for that not to be true, but that's okay, Dave. As long as you're enjoying responsibly.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing these traveling without moving, no passport required hashtags. That's what I've been using.
Yeah, it's been fun, but I can't wait till it's over.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to actually being at a real festival with real people, and hopefully one day having a dram with you guys in person would be amazing.
I look forward to that too. Amen. Yeah, there's going to be hug parties everywhere. The busiest room I can see. I think we'll voluntarily be jamming ourselves into them just to be near others, and it's exciting to be able to come to Australia and to see you anywhere on the booze road would be cool. It's been really great talking to you. I think we'll probably start to wrap up. I did have one more question. Dave, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I just want, Boutique Whisky is an independent bottler, and is independent bottling sort of received well in Australia? I know the distillers had heard about us, but I just wanted to, and certainly the stuff that Oak Barrel have been doing in Sydney and the bar in Melbourne, the Elysian Bar, they've been, I see, independent bottlers. Are they well received over there, or is it the big brands that they're still wanted to look at? Is independent bottler taking off in Australia? Because there's a couple of independent bottlers in Australia, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Heartwood is probably the most prevalent one, and they've Tim Duckett obviously makes some really cracking whiskies, and he's got a real cult following here. But to be honest, I would say that the concept of independent bottling is probably fairly new to a lot of whiskey drinkers here. It would probably tend to be, the more serious whiskey aficionados that are really interested in independent bottlers. I wouldn't say it's taken off. I'd say it's quite niche and small scale over here. But certainly the people that are really into their whiskey are looking out for those different bottlings that you can only get through indie bottlers.
Well, for that reason, it is an exciting time because it really is a Scottish tradition, I guess, of independent bottling. It started with the grocers picking up single malts because most of the produce of the distilleries were going to blends. That was what paid the bills, and that's who the customers were. That's what the world wanted to drink. Certainly the pink parts of the map and the Empire. But then local grocers would say, I'll take a cask of Cardew, I'll take a cask of Strathisla. And this tradition continues, it continues today. And you don't see it all around the world. So we're really, I think with Boutique, it's pretty cool that we're able to do that, to have the whole palette of global whiskey to choose from and to keep that tradition, that's really Scottish tradition, alive as this whiskey world blossoms the way it never has before. You might not have heard of some of the distillery names in the game we were playing, or the game of the whiskeys that are coming out from Boutique, but take note of them because it might be the first time you've heard some of them, but it won't be the last.
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, I'd certainly heard of all of the distilleries that you're releasing in this upcoming series, and I think it's really cool that you're doing it because it's just basically a way of doing a really nice showcase of Australian whiskey in a different context, and it gives it a little bit of it's an endorsement by Boutique that there's good stuff happening in Australia. So I think it's a really cool initiative.
Yeah, you're right. Of course. Yeah, you know all about it, but I do. The rest of the world, people listening to this, are probably just waking up to the fact that Australia is even on the whiskey map at all. Maybe Starward. Starward.
Yeah.
Is probably the one that people would have heard of most. I know that they're working hard in the U.S. and especially since the tariff on Scotch whiskey, there's been a great opportunity for Australian whiskey recently in America and in the UK for that matter. But these whiskeys and the future of whiskeys from down under, they could turn the whole whiskey world upside down, flip the old hegemonic order of Scotch on top with Australia on the top of the pile in the 21st century.
I hope so.
Yeah, a lot of these distilleries smaller distilleries are quite small, but there are distilleries that are, Starwood's been pretty active in the UK over the last couple of years, that's for sure. I've bumped into Starwood across whiskey shows up and down the country. And some of these other distilleries in Australia are starting to expand now, and I'm guessing I'll be seeing more Australian whiskey globally pretty soon, on a higher volumes as these distilleries ramp up their productions, because that's always been the problem. The distilleries have been so small. There has always been a very, very niche market, and I'm looking forward to these opening up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely going to happen.
Amen. We had David Vitale on a couple times this year or last year, speaking, and he does speak about fuck the rules. We don't have to pay attention to. Although Scotch whiskey is part of the inspiration, we don't have in Australia the same stringent laws that restrict us, so we can try new things. Although in fairness, still working within a small window. I would argue that's our word, but that's not a criticism at all. But it is to sort of bring up a question, or a last question to you, James, is about. I think you describe your podcast as non-denominational. Which means you belong to no, and I love that, belonging to no church and exploring, trying to find truth or whatever across the world without having any strict laws. But there must be. I wanted to ask you, what would be a sin? What would go against what you think is allowed? Flavored 30-year-old Scotch whiskey, or mixing grape and grain, or
Yeah, I think transparency would probably be the number one thing. Is just not being upfront about what who you are and what you're doing. That's probably the number one thing. It's kind of something that it's been a terrible issue in Japan, obviously, with what's happened with Japanese whiskey over there. We fortunately here we have some more specific legislation that protects what it is to be Australian whiskey, but there's certainly been a few cases of companies that are just kind of blurring the lines, be that by importing some bulk whiskey from Scotland, and then kind of, because they're an Australian distillery, they kind of package it in such a way that most people are going to look at it and just assume that it's produced locally. There's a few little examples like that, I think, and I think the main thing is people don't really mind if you're producing a world blend or you're bringing in bulk whiskey or whatever it is, just as long as you're upfront about it, it's fine. And then people can taste it and judge it purely on the basis of the liquid, but don't try and leave people in a situation where they might be misled.
Yeah, it seems fair and seems obvious, but of course, it's not in practice. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know we've discussed that even before the Japanese news came out a few weeks ago. But do you have any thoughts around that transparency thing?
Yeah, I mean the Japanese whiskey industry has needed to shape up their rules for a long time. We've all been saying that, so that's great news to see that come out, and things are going to change there. But most of us whiskey geeks knew which ones were which. We knew a lot of them weren't Japanese because there wasn't any distilleries at the time. But the whiskey world in Japan is exploding now, isn't it? Lots of new craft distilleries opening. So yeah, it is a really exciting time. And transparency, absolutely, we want to know a little bit more. I don't really care about all of the transparency, everything. I don't want to know what hat they were wearing that day when they were distilling, and the trousers, and what field it came from. It's not important to me. However, I am interested in the distilleries that are doing those heritage grains and trying to go back and say, trying those grains from yesteryear. I was digging into my barley spreadsheet and finding finding those grains that were distilled a long time ago, just to see.
Nerd alert. Nerd alert.
Nerd alert.
Yeah.
There's a full nerd alert there, yeah.
Boss level geek.
Yeah. But you need to be to navigate this truly global category now, and it's super exciting. I mean, as I've said already, I think Australian whiskey is really coming into its own, and truly honored to have this range of boutiques that we've been able to get a few casks and to be part of telling the rest of the world about Australian whiskey who maybe never experienced it before. So that's super cool. It's been awesome talking to you, James. I think we could talk a lot longer. Maybe we should come onto your podcast and do the same.
Yeah, we should. Let's. My people will speak to your people.
We have people.
People. Right.
Why aren't they doing this shit?
Thanks ever so much, James. Lovely to spend an hour or so with you. This has been really interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me, gents, and best of luck with the launch. I'm really excited about it. I'm sure everyone else will be here too.
Hope you enjoy them when you get your chance to get them in your glass. I'm sure that won't be soon. That won't be too long. Anyway, we hope you've enjoyed another dip into the whiskey world. Remember, you can catch all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and podcasts and all sorts of things. Wherever you find a podcast, we're there. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's at Uncorked Whisky Sessions. Easy to find. And head to our website if you want to explore more about Whiskey. We're trying to revamp the whole website at the moment. Well, John is. I'm not doing anything. BoutiqueWhisky.com. Lots of geeker stuff on there. All the Australian series will be up there from the 8 distilleries that we've bottled. Really looking forward to getting them out in the market and seeing how people react to them, because I've tasted them all and I really love them all. Yeah, superb. Catch you next time for some more Uncorked. I've been Boutique Dave.
I have been Dr. Whiskey.
And I've been James.
What a sign off. Fucking nailing it. 20 episodes in. Cheers.
Hey everybody, can you hear my voice?
Yes, a little loud, Sam.
Tough shit, you got no choice. So grab a glass and sit back in your chair, 'cause Uncorked is going live today.